Welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast, your source for the latest information about your Army Black Knights, with your host, Sal Interdonato.
Hey, what's up, Black Knight Nation? We're here on a Sunday night to talk some Army football with Dan and James from Ask for Football. They cover Army football very well for their website, and we're going to have some fun breaking down our top 10 Army football players for the 2020 season. We're each going to have a list, and we're going to break down who we thought were the best players for Army this season, a 9-3 season, a season that, you know, at first, who knew how many games were going to be on the schedule, and it turned out to be one of the more memorable seasons in Army football of recent years. So you can follow us on all the podcast platforms. We are on Amazon. We are on Google. We're everywhere. We're on Spotify and also Apple. And follow us on YouTube. And if you have any comments or rankings, you want to throw in your rankings in the chat, please send them to us, and we'll entertain those two on tonight. First, welcome, James and Dan. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We're just going to each of us are going to run through our top 10 Army players, and then we're going to have some conversation as to why or what we had right, the same, and what we had a little different. So, Dan, you can go first with your top 10. I'm interested. You pumped up this on Twitter, so I'm interested to hear what you have. So.
Well, yeah, so I think that this list is going to be controversial for a couple of reasons, not least of which is that there is not a quarterback on this list. So you start 5 different quarterbacks and play 6, and I think it's a little difficult to say, you know, this is the one guy we couldn't win without. There was very good play at the quarterback position at times, more often than not, but I putting this together and trying to figure out which quarterback to put on it, and I went through 10 and didn't get one. So for me, at number 10, I had punter Zack Harding. He was a serious weapon. I would argue that he had a case to be the MVP of the Army-Navy game. At number 9, we had defensive back Jabari Moore. Moore, in this case, is sort of standing in for the entire secondary, although when Ask for Football put together our list of the top 13 plays of the season, Moore was in 2 of them. He had the intercepted pitch 6 from Cincinnati, and also the interception in the end zone against Air Force. That were 2 of the biggest plays of the season. So that's kind of why he got the nod there. At number 8, I had fullback Jacoby Buchanan. At number 7, defensive lineman Kwabena Bonsu, who is one of my favorite players to watch. At number 6, tight end Chris Cameron, arguably the best player on the offense, but nevertheless, I have him here at 6. At number 5, linebacker Eric Smith. At number 4, defensive linebacker Amadeo West. At number 3, Nolan Cockrell, nose tackle. At number 2, offensive guard Mike Johnson. And at number 1, linebacker John Ratigan, who was a second-team All-American and at least one of the standings. So I thought that was amazing.
Well, that's an interesting list. A couple guys I don't have on my list, Dan. So, James, you're up.
Sure. I did not never mind 1 through 10 or 10 through 1, whatever you want to do. But I have mine split up offense, defense, special teams. I was thinking about going 5 and 5 offense, defense, but with how well the defense did this year and how well Zack Harding did this year, I did 5 defense, 4 offense, and a punter. So on offense, I have Jacoby Buchanan, Tyrell Robinson, Tyler, Sandon McCoy. On defense, I have John Ratigan, Eric Smith, Jabari Moore, Markel Broughton, Cedric Cunningham Jr., and then Zack Harding, the punter. And I'm happy to go through some of those that you might not have on your list, Dan and Sal.
Yeah, you definitely went a little heavier into the secondary than I did. I don't necessarily disagree. It was just those guys rotated in and out so often. It was a little hard to think about who made what place where.
You know what, Dan? You prompted me to change my list on the fly. because you have a good point with the quarterbacks, and sometimes you feel like, just because it's Army's offense, you have to put a quarterback on the list, right? So I'm going to go with 10, Tyrell Robinson. 9 is going to be Jabari Buchanan. I have Zack Harding 8. Okay. 7, I have Markel Broughton. 6, I have Mike Johnson. 5, I have Jabari Moore. 4, I have Nolan Cockrell. 3, I have Cedric Cunningham. 2, I have Eric Smith. And number 1, I have John Ratigan. So we agreed with John Ratigan as number 1. And originally I did have a quarterback on that list, but thinking right now, I had Tyrell Robinson on the outside, like he would have been my number 11. And I just think that what he brought to the offense as a game changer was pretty valuable to an offense that sometimes has struggled to reach the end zone and against the better teams. Against the better teams. So so that's my top 10. Now I guess we can really talk about what we had, similar, what we might have had different, and that kind of conversation. I mean, Bonzu. I like the pick. I like the pick, to be honest with you. What made you go in that direction?
So if you think about the way Army's defense plays, not to get all Army on you, but when I watch the game, it sort of takes me into the same headspace that being a tank platoon leader sort of took me into. So think about it in terms of the way that their defensive line works. It's a 3-4. So the defensive line is essentially trying to fix the offense in place to allow their linebackers to sort of maneuver around and make plays. Right. This is why you see guys like Eric Smith and John Ratigan and Cole Christensen and just all these linebackers flying around to make plays, because when the defensive line is doing its job, it's enabling those guys to get into this open space and make those plays. And but Bonsu and Cockrell, both in the inside, have been better than that. Right. They've been able to actually get penetration right into the heart of the offense, which is a thing that Army's defense has not been good at really ever before, I would say, the last couple of years. And this year, I think they were probably better than ever. He brings a level of athleticism and just strength to that position that I don't think Army's seen very often. And when he wasn't in there, I thought you saw that too. I mean, I thought that made a difference.
Yeah, I think in the past too, right? Sometimes Army would go with 1 defensive lineman or 2 defensive linemen in some sets, especially when Bateman was the DC, right? Sometimes you just saw Ray Wright up there with Wumbio Ituga, and that was it. This year, they were able to rotate 6 guys in, right? I mean, pretty much rotate 6 guys. And I look at, you have Amadeo West also on your list, right? So another defensive lineman. And, Amadeo's contributions, not just on the field, but also, off the field, have to count for something. That's why I had Mike Johnson on my list, because Mike Johnson, the offense wasn't the greatest this year as far as scoring against the really good teams, but Mike Johnson was that constant on the offensive line, right? I mean, he was the best offensive lineman, I thought.
They played a very conservative offensive scheme almost the whole year, and I think if Christian Anderson had been under center from start to finish without getting hurt, that would not have been the case. The game plan that they played at Army Navy was a game plan that you play when you have a sophomore quarterback in his second start in the fog. It wasn't like, this is all we can do. It's like, this is the plan that gives us the best chance to win. And my only critique of the whole season, really, you can see in the bowl game against West Virginia is, they ran some of the more, like they ran the midline triple option where he fakes the give to the fullback and then turns around and pitches it almost straight back to a slot back. The triple off the midline. I think that might have been the only time they ran that all season. But you used to see Bradshaw run that occasionally, and even in the snow at Army Navy, because they would trust him to do that. So I don't know that I'm ready to blame it on any, sort of the offense on anything except injuries, and they know they've got a good defense, and so they're just trying to sort of manage as best they can. And they got 9 wins. Frustrating as it was, that's how you win 9 games.
Yeah,
you did see a lot of the midline earlier in the year before Christian Anderson got hurt. Yeah, you saw, at least in the first few games, I know there were likely a lot more called, options. I call it Wildcat Light. But you did see a lot of called plays just because it's early in the year. I think another part of that was not only are we on quarterback number, pick your number. You're right. You're taking a team that didn't have a sufficient summer camp, and you're putting them into one of the most complex, offenses in football and saying, run it.
And by the way, the guy starting under center for you started at slot back, so he took 0 reps.
right.
All over the summer.
And if you look at other triple option teams this year, it was relatively similar results or worse. So the fact that Army was the best triple option team this year, and they weren't really a triple option team, they were a Wildcat light team. Fine, I'll take it.
Yeah, Dan, another one of your choices, Chris Cameron. You know, I just go into your decision on Chris Cameron because Chris Cameron is a valuable guy. So
he is probably the best tight end they've had at Army since I've been following the team. I mean, he is an elite level blocker, and he catches the ball pretty well out of the backfield. I mean, I don't know what else you can ask the guy to do. He strikes me as the kind of guy who probably had a lot of choices and came to Army because if you want to play football and you also want to be a commissioned officer, you have to go to a service academy, like full stop. That's the only way to do it. So, yeah, man, I just think he's one of the best players on the team and definitely one of the best players on the offense.
Yeah,
he's one of the few guys on the offense like Tyrell Robinson who you can say, I can use this guy and create a matchup problem on the other side. And usually we have to scheme, but in his case, like he's actually got the size and speed and athleticism to create an honest to God matchup problem.
Yeah, his dad Cam was a college and pro football coach forever, so there's a good pedigree there. It seems like the game comes easy to him, right? I mean, you look at it, like he's practically dragging Tyler into the end zone on that one touchdown in the third quarter of the bowl game, right? He's basically carrying him into the end zone. I mean, he's just a good, smart football player. So
and you know, most of the time what they ask those tight ends to do is to go out and block and to get out and like in space and block safeties and stuff. But this is a guy who can really catch the ball and move the chains. And I would be really surprised if we don't see more of that next season. I'd be really surprised.
Only hope with more you got to throw the ball a little bit more just to keep defenses. We could talk about this every podcast almost. Keep the defenses honest. You have guys that. Look at. Especially in the Army-Navy game, they played a specific game plan. Like the way Navy was set up, they were right on the line of scrimmage. It's not like Brent Davis couldn't figure out that the pass was there. He just didn't want to do it. Like he just didn't want to risk it in the fog. Like he knew everything. Like he saw it.
By the way, Air Force came into the Army Air Force game with the same mentality. And so did Army, by the way.
Yeah.
And they started playing, and in the late third quarter, Air Force said, all right, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to throw the damn ball. And they did, and they scored very easily. Lost. And they were a Jabari Moore interception away from sealing the game up on another pass. So, Air Force decided, hey, we're not going to do this. And they did make that mistake, and they lost the game. And that's why Army said, we're not doing it. We know mistakes like that can happen.
You look at next year, Cameron coming back. Get Isaiah Alston healthy, right? I mean, you got all your wide receivers back. Hopefully, I mean, Mike Roberts showed flashes here and there. So did Reckon Donaldson also did. Use those guys. Don't just use them to block. I don't know. That's a conversation for another podcast probably and stuff. We all had Zack Harding on our list, and that's not something often you can say. You can have an Army specialist on your top 10 list for players, right? I can't remember the last time I might have had one. James, just go into your thinking with Zack Harding and why you had him on there.
Yeah, so his punt average went down from last year by about 5 yards, but his accuracy went straight up. Here's the stat line that sealed him in the top 10 for me. He had 17 punts downed inside the 20-yard line and 2 touchbacks. 2 touchbacks the entire season. So this is a guy who, again, 17 punts inside the 20 and it only went to the end zone twice. Like that is superb. It's the reason that we won the field position battle all season long. There was one game where I felt like we didn't have the field position battle, which was Tulane. And then in the second half of the bowl game, I felt like we didn't have it after the onside kick. But other than that, if Zack Harding had a say in the field position game, we were winning, and he was extremely consistent. He was the one part of the special teams. I mean, the special teams was fantastic all year long, especially with blocking kicks, but that's all sporadic. That you can't count on that. When it happens, it's great. Zack Harding was a special team player who was consistent from Middle Tennessee State through the Liberty Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wrote in some games, you could put him right up in the top of the names for game MVP in some of the games that they play, especially the tighter games. You can have his name, like, if he didn't get the special teams ball, I don't know who else you would have given it to. You know,
Air Force comes to mind.
Yeah, except maybe the one time what Wilson Cateau had that one, 40 that big run on the fake. Maybe you could give it to Wilson Cateau, but yeah, I mean he was so consistent. Is there anybody that surprises you, James, on any of our list, or any of the players that might have been on the edge of your list that maybe did not?
Yeah, I think Amadeo West was on the edge of my list. That push against Navy on 4th and goal from the inch line was certainly a massive play. Although I think, again, I sort of didn't want to put – I couldn't justify putting any one of those guys on the list ahead of some of those stat leaders. But I certainly appreciate how good the defensive line was this year. But I think a lot of it was the holistic defensive line, not an individual player. I think I had Mike Broughton was the one player that neither of you guys had. He's on the list for me because he led the team in solo tackles, 40, which is just unreal.
Yeah.
So I put him on my list. He had a forced fumble and 2 interceptions as well. So I put him on there. But I'm not trying to diss the defensive line at all. I certainly think that it's the best one we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I think a guy on my edge of my list is a guy who really played a lot in the bowl game, was in the rotation, Ryan Duran. Ryan Duran made a difference in games. He had 3 block kicks or punts or extra points or whatever you want to call it. On that bowl game, West Virginia had a hard time blocking him. They were holding him almost on every play. He had a sack, a fumble recovery. And he's a guy, you look at his stats, just like nose tackle, Cockrell, 28 tackles, right? But 7 of Nolan's tackles were behind the line of scrimmage. A quarter of his tackles. You look at Duran. Duran made an impact. I think he's the next year. He's a guy that probably is definitely on this list. Maybe there'll be a lot of defensive. There'll be like 3 defensive line guys on this list next year, probably.
Yeah. Well, this team it's amazing how young this team is for the amount of success that they had, especially given what a crazy season it was. You look at sort of the way that the season shook out without a lot of, spring ball or summer prep, and then all these young players coming on, and that doesn't necessarily lend itself or suggest that you're about to win 9 games and, play a Power 5 team, right to the limit in the bowl game.
Yeah, you look at also, on offense, I just didn't think there really wasn't a complete standout on offense, especially like a skilled position guy, right? Because we talked about the quarterbacking, the fullbacks kind of rotated in, and the slot backs had their opportunities. They took a Robinson took advantage when he had his opportunities, but maybe didn't get enough. So there wasn't really one true offensive player that stood out and said, "Here,
so I know
the MVP." So
I know I'm the only one with a quarterback on his list, and the other offensive player that I don't think anyone had on my list was Sandon Mccoy. So I feel I defend Tyler and Mccoy real quick.
I don't think you need to defend McCoy. I thought,
fair.
Yeah,
McCoy did not have that many rushing yards, and when he did rush, it was 3.1 yards per carry. But he was the finisher this year. He accounted for 1/4 of the team's offensive touchdowns. This guy, when it came time to put the ball in the end zone, it was Sandon McCoy, and on 4th down, when we were on, against the Air Force on 4th and whatever it was. There was a part of me, and I'm glad that this didn't happen, but there was a part of me wishing that Sandon McCoy was the one out there and not Buchanan.
Oh, I thought that too, actually. And I think it's, after the second fumble against Georgia Southern, when the whole offense looked like it was on the edge of just coming completely unraveled, I don't think it's a surprise that McCoy is the guy that they put in there, and they handed it off to him twice just to get everybody to settle down. And they, I think they either scored a touchdown on that drive. I think they scored a touchdown on the drive. He's also was the best blocking fullback, which is not a small part of a fullback's job. They made a big deal about that during the Air Force game. And after he went out, not surprisingly, Army really struggled to run anything except the fullback at times, because you lost your best blocker, your lead blocker.
By the way, the part of me that wanted Sandon McCoy, when I was going back to look at this, I told that part of me that it was an idiot because I looked at Buchanan, and one of the stat lines I found, he was the only player on Army this year with more than 15 rushing attempts to not lose a single yard.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So that's pretty. I mean, on 4th and 1, 4th and goal from the inch line, that's somebody you want in there.
Absolutely. The one guy that I had, since we're talking about fullbacks, that I wanted to put on there but didn't quite have space was Anthony Atkins. I just don't think he got quite enough opportunities, but I think he's got the best athleticism in the fullback room, and I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of has that breakout year. He reminds me so much of Andy Davidson when he runs the ball. He's actually, you wouldn't think it, but he's actually almost as big as Buchanan, but he's a lot faster. And I don't know if he's quite got that hammerhead mentality, but he was out there breaking runs all season, especially against suspect rushing defenses. And he's also the fullback that you can sort of hand it off to go off tackle, and that he's going to make that happen, which some of those other guys didn't necessarily as good as.
Atkins definitely has that fall forward mentality more than I think anyone on the team.
I think I'm not that he played badly this year, because I think he played very well, obviously, but I'm waiting for him to take the next step and for it to be undeniable. And I feel like we saw that from Buchanan this year. And I wish that Anthony Atkins had gotten a few more touches, though.
I personally think that something's holding Atkins back. I don't know. I think that is it because you look at the bowl game, right, with Buchanan being out. I thought that was the prime opportunity to get Atkins some more touches, get him involved in the offense more. And I think he played like I charted it. He played 14 plays. He had 9 of those plays he carried the ball. So he pretty much knew if he was going to be in the game, he was going to run it most of the time. And I just thought that, I thought they would get him more of a run in that game early and often. And, I understand you got McCoy in there and you got Cade Bernard, but I thought that he should have been featured more in that bowl game a little bit and got more of an opportunity. That I don't know if an injury or maybe he was banged up or anything. We don't know that. But I thought that he should have been given.
I think there's always going to be a bias towards firsties in bowl games, though. They're always going to try to run the seniors out there and give them one last go. So while I share the sentiment, I think that's why you saw mostly McCoy.
Yeah, well, next year, it's basically 3 of the 4 guys back, and maybe throw Tyson Riley in there, and who knows what they have coming through prep this year too. So
that's one thing about my list is 8 of the. Or only 2 of the 10 guys, so 8 of the 10 on my list are returning. So there's only 2 that are graduating.
That's a good question. I have 1, 2, 3. I only have 3 firsties. I'm not sure what year Zack Harding is.
He's a cow. He's a junior.
Okay.
Yeah. So my thing on Tyler and why he ultimately ended up on my list, he was borderline, but I think he ends up on the list. Is all year long I was a huge advocate for Cade Ballard. I thought that our offensive line was not doing the job it normally does. And that when that's the case, you want a quarterback who's a bruiser. You don't want a quarterback who's open space. You want a quarterback that's going to get hit and gain another 2 to 3 yards after it. And there's one quarterback on our staff that clearly had the body type for that, and it wasn't Tyler. Yet all season long, Tyler continued to impress me when he was called on. Yeah. And it surprised me, and I was very pleasantly. It was a pleasant surprise from his first appearance when Christian Anderson went down through the Liberty Bowl.
It is crazy because he's such a small guy, and yet you see him pushing the pile like really consistently all season. And he must be an animal in the weight room.
His toughness is off the charts. His toughness to me is off the charts. He played through a lot of injury, played through a lot of pain, and you're right. I mean, he could take a really hard hit and still try to move the ball forward, which is something like, if I don't know if he has the body type to have that changeover that Bradshaw and Hopkins had, right, in the weight room. I don't know if he has the frame to get to where they were, pushing over 200 pounds and able to take that contact, still face some pretty tough hits and even get banged up a lot. We'll see. I think we'll see how it shakes off in the spring with the quarterback.
That weight room, plus the fact that he wasn't working out all summer long as much as you might think because they didn't have that summer camp. I remember walking by Calvin Hopkins and just not recognizing. He was in my major. I knew who he was. And I remember walking by him and not recognizing him.
Wow.
He like tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, dude, what the hell? Like, you didn't say hi? I turned around and I'm like, oh. Did not recognize at all.
Too funny.
Put on some muscle, yeah. So
yeah, those were the difference for those guys to take their college careers to the next level. So see what Tyler does. Christian Anderson's more of a different type of body type, right, and does a little bit different things. Some people are calling for Anderson to be the number one quarterback in the spring, so we'll see.
It's going to be an interesting spring. I think any of them could reasonably win. I mean, a guy I've always thought has arguably the best body type, if nothing else, is Jamel Jones. I mean, there's nothing that he doesn't do well in the offense. He just happened to get hurt when he got his opportunity, but that's that's not the end of the world. Bradshaw spent a lot of his yearling year hurt and then came back as a cow and was obviously really good. So I think I would assume that Tyler will come in as the presumed starter in the spring, but I don't think that's set in stone. And I don't know why they would set it in stone.
How great of a situation for Coach Monken is this? You got 4 guys, and any of them could be your starting quarterback. They show up for spring practice, and you say, hey, guys, open tryouts. You just perform, and we're going to pick the best one. And you have 4 guys, and any one of them could be that guy.
Well, I don't know. When you have a guy like Tyler with that much speed, and then you have a guy like Tyrell Robinson who also has that much speed, and then you have an offense where theoretically the speed option or the counter option ought to be staple plays, I would really want to get like a lot of reps in with that, especially when they were struggling to pitch the ball early.
I think the biggest thing is, I thought this was a thing all season, is if the offensive line is really good at creating space, you want a speed quarterback in there. You want Tyler. If they're not, I'm still gonna ask for Cade Ballard. I mean, I don't want something because we saw this happen last year, right? We had Laws, and he got hurt against Air Force on what looked like a pretty cheap hit, and you know what? Sometimes that happens, but he's out for the year because he's 165, 175 pound guy, can't sustain those kinds of hits in a 13-game season, and eventually they're going to go down. So. We happened a little bit earlier in the season this year with Christian Anderson, and you want someone who's not just going to be the best quarterback for game 1, but a good quarterback for all 13 games.
Yeah. How crazy is it that we went through 6 quarterbacks? 6.
Yeah.
That's madness.
Yeah. And you know what? I was surprised, maybe a little surprised, because I heard a lot of good things about Christian Parish, the freshman, and I saw him in some, preseason scrimmage video having some big runs. And granted, you're not there in person, so you don't know who was in the game, what the plays were, but it seemed like he had a lot of talent, and they tried to even use him out of the backfield earlier in the year, and he I don't know if it was an injury or he just wasn't around toward the end of the season. I think that's a kid has a ton of talent too.
It's so hard as a plebe to perform to the level that you're going to later in your cadet career. I mean, obviously I played a different sport, but, and I don't think I had like a bad plebe year or anything, but man, it's like playing with, weights strapped on your shoulders. It's just it's not conducive to being your best self. And I think, when you see plebes in there late in the season having good plays, like that means that those guys are outstanding. It does, or that the team is desperate. And that's no other way to read that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So Dan, go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, I wanted to if anybody's watching right now, if they have any comments on who their top players were this season, or just want to ask us any questions, please feel free. Sorry for interrupting, James.
Oh no, so my opinion on Dan's biggest snub is Tyrell Robinson. You want to tell us why you didn't put him on your list? All-purpose yards leader.
He had a lot more potential than actually showed up in games, I think, most of the time. I have always thought that if Army could get a real burner to use the way the Navy used Malcolm Perry when they used him as a slot back to really dictate to the defense, you have to watch this guy or he's going to take it to the house. But we haven't seen that from Tyrell Robinson yet. Maybe once or twice early in the season. And maybe he got nicked up. It's a long season, plebe year, like I said, dragging on. Certainly he catches very well out of the backfield, which is a very good thing for him to do as a slot back. But I want to see him take the speed option pitch to the house like twice, and then let's have this discussion. And maybe I'm grading him on a curve because I know, like, I have an expectation in my head of what a guy like that should be able to do. But yeah, that's what they've got to do. They got to get him on the edge, and he's got to take one of those pitches to the house and force a change to the game plan. And that's what I need to see.
I think that he was a lot more dangerous. I mean, I remember those breakout games he had, first and second game of the year. Yeah. He was a lot more dangerous when we were actually running the triple option. And once it came down to running Wildcat Light, it was the offenses, or at least the coaching staff's desire to pitch the ball was very, very low.
That's true.
You have to call that pitch out of the huddle, and you're not going to call that pitch that often. So his opportunities get severely limited.
And, they kept calling that counter I don't know what they put him at, like, the fullback. Yeah, that counter dive or whatever. And it's not his fault, but it just never seemed like it was there. And I'm not hating on the guy. He has a lot of talent. He made some very good plays, but I do not think that he has had the game that he needs to have. Yeah.
He did extremely well. Like, you could tell this year when they were calling a pitch post Anderson injury that they were calling hard pitches. It wasn't option pitching.
Yeah. Well, I'm not talking about the rocket sweeps. I'm talking about an option pitch.
Right. And it happens so
rarely.
You saw maybe one of those a game, if you were lucky, after the Anderson injury. And when you're seeing him get spots, it's a hard pitch to the outside, and you're not going to go to the house on those. You're going to, if you're lucky, you pick up 8 yards, and he had a good amount of those. So I thought he did very, very well for the lot he was given this year.
Yeah, in our poll, I put out a Twitter poll on guys who will emerge and will have a breakout season. Who will emerge and have a breakout season in 2021? It was 4 choices. These were my 4 choices that I came up with. Atkins, Jordan Law, Spencer Jones, or Tyrell Robinson. And Robinson, 57% won the poll. So I mean, it's a guy that Army fans are pretty high on. You look at guys. We talked about Atkins already among that poll. We talked. Spencer Jones is a guy who comes in. He's got to be. You think he has to be the heir apparent to Ratigan, right? At linebacker, since he did replace him in the bowl game. And you talked about, Dan, a freshman, right, being thrown into that situation. And was he perfect? No. Did he hold his own? I think so in that game. So.
Well, anyway, of those 4 choices, Atkins is the one that's going to have the breakout season. So I'm sorry, 57% of you guys are not correct.
I always think it's harder for a fullback to have a breakout season just because we have so many of them. I mean, a breakout season for a fullback is like, all right, he got 400 yards, 450 yards, and he had Andy
Wolfe had 2 breakout seasons? I mean, he was the unquestioned leader in the backfield, for at least a full year.
But that was, I mean, that's a little bit. I think when Wolfe was the fullback, we had 4 guys, and Wolfe was getting 30% of the snaps, so 30 to 40% of the snaps. So it's hard to have a breakout year when you're not going to see the field on 50% of plays.
Yeah, true. The biggest win for Army this season. I just had 2 choices: Navy or Air Force on the poll. Navy 67%. Is that something that you guys buy into, that the Navy win was more important?
Yeah, I think you had 33% of Air Force fans voting in that poll. 100% of West Pointers will say that the Navy game was the big one.
I would rather, and I know that I don't share this opinion with everyone and all Army fans, but I would rather beat Navy the next 10 years and lose to Air Force the next 10 years and not win a single Commander-in-Chief trophy than go 5-5 against each and win 5 CICs. Like, it is on another level. I just don't care at all when you're comparing the 2.
That seems to be the opinion of a lot of people, James. Defensive MVP was kind of a landslide for John Ratigan, 79%. The next guy up was Nolan Cockrell at 11% in the poll. I think, as Dan and I we had John as our number one player of Army this season. James, what you agree with that? That John Ratigan was.
Yeah, if I were to rank, it would either be Ratigan or Eric Smith. They ended up. It was actually crazy. Both John Ratigan and Eric Smith had the same tackle total in the year, not just total tackles, but solo versus assisted tackles. So their stats were the same. Now, to be fair, Ratigan had that positive COVID test in the bowl game. So if he had had that opportunity, he probably would have been the leader. So that would have pushed him over the edge in my book, I think. I think that Eric Smith ended up with a few more sacks. It was 3.5, vice 1.5. So there's that. But Ratigan was the big player. You know, when we needed to seal a game against Navy and hop on a bad pitch that was on the turf, who was there to do it? It was John Ratigan. Who had a pick six? It was John Ratigan. He was a big player all season long.
I have to defend Eric Smith, though. He had an amazing season, and if he wasn't playing right next to a second-team All-American, we would still be talking about him quite a bit. He had the game-sealing interception against Air Force, and I am not even slightly worried about him, as sort of the captain of the linebackers corps next year. Like, he's going to be great, and I'm actually really looking forward to that. So
it's kind of wrong, I think. Because we used to say, King and Timpf, right? Those were the guys, right? But nobody says Ratigan and Smith, and they really should, right? Like they really are two fantastic linebackers.
Well, King and Timpf just played next to each other for 3 years, so we had so long to get used to them as a pair. Eric Smith has been next to Cole Christensen and now John Ratigan. He happens to have been next to guys who are getting NFL looks.
Yeah. Here's a question for you guys. Linebacker combos, King and Timpf, Christensen and Nautical, Ratigan and Smith. Who you got? Who's the better
I guess I'm going to have to take King and Timpf just because they played together longer and because, King just made it into the fully funded law education program after being an Army Ranger. And he is going to be a really excellent, model of what you could be as a West Point graduate. So it's unfair, but that's where my head is.
I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I think the most iconic picture of Army linebackers was that 2016 Army Navy game where they're coming out of the tunnel ready to end the streak, and they're lined up how they line up on the field. And it was Brinson, King, Timpf, and Noctegal. Yep. And it was just the four of them walking out side by side onto the field, and you saw that. And you're like, yep, nope, this is the year it's ending. There's no way these guys are letting Navy put enough points on the board.
My personal would be Nautical and Christensen. I just
really?
I don't know, just because of the way it ended, right? The way it ended for that duo where they just dominated that bowl game against Houston. Nautical had a big plays in that, and Christensen was always around the ball, knocking away passes in the end zone that were. Two-year captain too, just like Timpf. And I would personal favorite would be Nautical and Christensen, just in my opinion. Offensive MVP in our poll was kind of interesting. 31% for Buchanan, 30% for Tahir Tyler. So it was really close, and probably the last vote might have clinched it for Buchanan. My personal offensive MVP would have been Mike Johnson. Where do you guys go?
It's a little hard to, especially from TV copy, to say this offensive lineman is so great and we just don't have those looks. We don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Every week it seems like Coach Munkin would come out and say, well, Mike Johnson had 25 knockdown blocks, and there's no question that he was a settling leadership influence. You got the picture of him in the bowl game physically dragging Tahir Tyler back from talking smack to the West Virginia guys. So I don't have an issue saying that he was the MVP. Did I have him as my top? I did. I had him as my top offensive player. It's a little easier to vote for the skill position guys because we see them with the ball.
Yeah. James, who would be your offensive MVP?
I would take Buchanan. I just think that stat line of all year, he had 0 lost yards. I mean, that's what the Army offense is about, and he executed it to a T. In his breakout season, he had 111 rushes. He had more rushes than anyone except for Tyler. 4.3 yards a carry.
That's outstanding.
Never lost a yard for a guy that we had never seen before. So I mean, 4.3 yards per carry is what you expect out of Wolfe and Davidson, and we're seeing it out of Buchanan. So I'm going to hand it to him.
Well, plus, he played through that last quarter in the Air Force game on a busted wheel and still made it happen. That was super impressive. I mean, it was really impressive.
He gave me a heart attack on the fourth try, but he made it happen. Yeah.
One poll that I didn't put out, but just wanted to get your guys' feedback on is play of the year. What do you think was the biggest play of the year? I know I was going to put up a couple for the poll. I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on what the play of the year was for Army football in 2020.
Go ahead, James. I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to see if I'm right.
Oh, I don't think so. My play of the year was the fumble against Navy that went out of bounds. That was the play. That was the biggest swing. That was the biggest swing in winning percentage for the biggest game of the year. I mean, Navy picks that up and they go back and score a touchdown. Navy is likely to win that game from that point going forward. They don't get it. Harding boots a punt deep into Navy territory. Navy can't do much with it. They punt it back. We score the only touchdown of the game on the next drive. So, I mean, that was the single play that had the biggest swing from one team to the other, and it was in the biggest game of the year. So,
I would say it was the fourth down stop in the Army-Navy game, because essentially the same logic. Navy, their whole game plan was to have their defense hold us in check until their athletic young quarterback can break one run and do something with it. And that worked. Like, both the game plans worked. So it ended up coming down to 4 or 5 plays that determined the difference. That one with the fumble out of bounds, Ratigan's fumble recovery, the fourth down stop, and then Army scoring when they got into so Frederica Daniels said goal line stand. Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's much easier to pick goal line stand because Army actually did something good on that play, whereas the other one is just pure luck.
Oh, they won 9 games. Come on, man. That makes it sound
I'm saying in the Navy game, it's much easier to pick that play. I know I've told Daniel this before. But I'm watching, where I am with a whole bunch of Navy players around, or not Navy players, Navy grads around and Navy fans around. I'm the only West Point fan there. And my head is in my hands as I'm watching it through the TV, and they're all celebrating. It goes out of bounds. And I was more ecstatic at that moment than I was like the entire rest of the season. So that's what pushes it for me.
Mrs. Daniels is actually Markel Broughton's mom. So Markel Broughton's mom chiming in with her opinion.
Hey, I had Markel. I was the only one. So
James. I had Markel on my list at number 7.
Oh, you did?
He made the second down tackle, right, in that same stand. Didn't he have the tackle on the outside on second down? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I'm not sure. He is a strong safety. He was one of the best strong safeties we've had in a while.
Yeah.
His ability to not commit pass interference penalties was unprecedented in recent Army football. So I was a fan of that.
My play of the year is going to be I got to be different. So I'm going to go with Cunningham chasing down our line to prevent the touchdown and leading to the goal line stand. That would be my play. Was it reminiscent of John Voight? It was different. It was taken on a different angle, but just the hustle to get there and stop our line from getting into the end zone, I thought was one of my more. And also, Dan, one of mine is actually Mike Johnson taking the players out of the end zone to prevent a fight a potential fight during the bowl game. I thought that was
or even just a penalty. Yeah,
for me. Yeah. So.
Yeah. My other play was the touchdown against Navy. Mm-hmm. And it seems kind of silly, I guess, because Army got the ball on the 7-yard line, and they didn't have to really go that. Maybe they got it on 13, but it's not like they had to drive super long to get that touchdown. However, they had not done anything, and they ran it in from 5 yards out. Looked good doing it. I really think that if they needed to find another gear, I really think that they could have moved the ball more effectively. It seemed like late in the game they found something on offense, and
I think they were more willing to take risks later in the game because they had that lead, and it wasn't the end of the world if you gave up a long interception. or something bad happened. So they were more willing to take that risk later to try to seal it, and they were able to. But yeah, they certainly were far more conservative earlier.
Yeah.
I think that Navy game will go down certainly as a game to remember for a long time, especially when you can put up that stat of a goose egg, right? That's something that's always going to be referenced till now until forever in that rivalry now. So that's something that, the game to end the streak, the Navy streak was a big win for Army. I'm not going to compare this year's win over Navy to that, but it's maybe not too many notches down below that as importance in there's of course the history of the rivalry, right? I mean, it's a big deal. So,
well, for the longest time, when I was a cadet, I always thought like Army's going to win this game. Like that's just kind of the way it was in the 90s. Army definitely got the best of this rivalry all the time, and it seems like we're finally sort of getting back to where Army is on top of this rivalry after a long period down, which is pretty amazing, all things considered.
I mean, 4 of the last 5 is a huge difference than losing the last 2 and winning 3 before that. I mean, it's just night and day, and 4 of the last 5 is pretty meaningful. So, especially when you throw 3 CICs in there.
Yeah, I don't know why I even put out the poll. It should have just been one choice, right? I know why I even put out that poll. But hey, guys, it's been a lot of fun breaking down our player list, and basically we kind of reviewed the season in a nutshell too, going over some important points. Is there anything that we might have missed on your guys' end that you'd like to address before we get out of here?
No, I think we're good. Asforfootball.com at Asforfootball. That's us. But that's it.
James, you have anything to add? Any parting shots?
No, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having us.
No problem. Great having both of you on, and follow us. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming up on podcasts this week. We're going to have Bob Beretta hopefully on Tuesday night. He just got promoted. Yeah, he just got promoted. He got hired as the new Lemoyne athletic director. He's been with Army for 30 years. I'm sure he has a lot of stories. I want to talk about the one story during the snow game in 2012 where I had to sleep in the press box that night because we couldn't get out of post. I want to bring that one up. That's one of the highlights of my reporter's career there, and we'll talk about that. We're going to have we hope to have Ben Kotwika on this week with Steve Anderson. We're going to bring Ben on, the 96 captain, and a guy, Justin Schaaf, who played during Steve Anderson's era as a undersized defensive lineman. He's now involved with the Atlanta Falcons in their kind of front office type staff deal. So we're going to have a lot of stuff coming up. Really appreciate you guys coming on. And for everybody, thanks for joining us, and have a great night.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. Thank you for listening to the Black Knight Nation podcast with your host, Sal Interdonato. For more information on your Army Black Knights, visit BlackKnightNation.com. And be sure to subscribe, follow, rate, and review on your favorite podcast